Hi, everyone. It's Larry Johnson, your host for Eight Principles Voices and founder of the Eight Principles. And I'm delighted to have with me James Barnett today, who is the CEO of the Come and See Foundation. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, just think the chosen and the organization that actually now holds all the IP for the chosen. I hope I'm teasing you. All right, here we go. So, and we're going to have a candid conversation today, and I'm going to find out about James's background. I mean, how do you come to be CEO of Come and See? How does that work? And then we'll go from there, and we'll talk about where they're going with this thing. I mean, those of you who know I'm a big fan of The Chosen. Rather late, I came to it late, but I've just been very impressed with the way they've done it and how they've done it, and of course why they're doing it. So I want to welcome James. James, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Larry. It's good to be here.
Now, you are obviously somewhere down south, or maybe Texas, or maybe you got the accent there.
Arkansas, believe it or not, I'm in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas,
Okay, all right, the Ozarks. Okay.
the Ozarks, very much so,
um
up in the very corner of the state, in this Northwest Arkansas corridor that's growing rapidly between Walmart and JB Hunt and Tyson and the University of Arkansas. We've got a lot of growth that has continued to happen here, and so it's a beautiful area. We didn't want to tell anybody about it for a lot of years, but now they've discovered it. So here they come.
well, I've been there. I've seen Bridges, the art museum. um
Yes, Crystal Bridge is amazing.
yes, it is. Yeah, you're really growing up there for sure. And now I may have mentioned to you that my wife's from Tulsa, so that's not too far from
It's
where
about
you are.
70 miles away, about an hour and 10-minute drive.
Yeah,
Yep, it's
it
right down
is.
the road.
So now, tell me a little bit about you grew up, you went to school. What did you do in your early life?
Yeah, well, I grew up a country boy here in Northwest Arkansas. My parents were both from here, and so this was just a small area, rural area. And I went to school here, and then uh, decided to play college football, and went to Baylor my first year, and got injured, and decided to come back to a smaller school called John Brown University here in Siloam Springs, a couple thousand students, a really great liberal arts school that has the motto head, heart, and hand. It's really a strong school. And so I came back here my sophomore year because my dad had got a teaching job there, and I could go to school tuition free. And I didn't have any money, so tuition free was really a good deal.
That helps.
And I thought I would do that. It helps a lot. And so I went to school here and uh, met a young lady that came from Wyoming to school here. And a few years later, we got married and had our family here. And while I was in school, I met two gentlemen that had moved here from California with a small business called DaySpring Cards. And they I met them through my father had come here, moved their business and their homes back here to the Midwest. And when I was getting my master's at the University of Arkansas, I met them, and I was thinking about what I was going to do. I was interviewing with Conoco and Exxon and AT&T, and T, and was going to go to
Mhm.
Dallas or Houston or St.
Yeah.
Louis or Kansas City
Well,
because there weren't that many jobs.
that's what you did those days. You went out to the
That's what
college
you did.
recruiters and you
Yeah.
made all the. Yep, yep. I know. I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'd met with all them, and then I met these two guys. I had this small little $1 million business and about 15 employees, and my wife had got a teaching job. So I decided, since I was graduating in December, to do some work with them, and that assignment, when I got started, I fell in love with just this idea of business and ministry, really a for-profit business that was really motivated. What I would say our motivation was ministry, our method was business, but our message was Jesus. And we just presented that in a way that was great, great product, great messaging with excellence, and did that for 40 years. Was the CEO or the president there for right at 29, over 29 years. Just grew up there, never planned on staying at a place like that for my most of my career, but God had another plan. I did that for 42 years up until a couple of years ago, and that's when I stepped away from there, and that's what brought me to come and see.
So, what was your reaction when they said, "Hey, James, we've got a new foundation. Doesn't have any money yet. Got to raise the money for it, uh, and yet we have big plans." That either energized you or it scared the you know what out of you. It's one of those two
Yeah.
reactions.
Well, you know what it was when I was finishing up my assignment there at DaySpring, I knew I was going to work, another 10 or 20 years. I mean, as far as just, I didn't know if it was going to be like a full-time job or, working with foundations or ministries or whatever. But I knew the Green family because they had the Hobby Lobby stores, and
Yes.
I'd sold to them for 40 years, and so I knew them, and so right after I was announced I was quote retiring, I got a call the very next day, and it was my friend Mark Green, and Mark said, "Hey, I'm working to uh, get the chosen into multiple languages around the world. I think it's one of the best opportunities we have to share the historical story of Jesus. And I've launched this new foundation. I'm just getting it started. Would you come and help me be a part of that?" And so I thought about it for a few months and then decided that was the right thing to do and helped him became the vice chair of the board and did that, for the following year. And then when we ended up spending that next year working out to buy the IP and to keep it in a safe nonprofit, uh, foundation for the duration, so that we could make it, free for the world and get that, and then also finish those last, 3 seasons at the time. So that's what we've been doing, and started the CEO role back in November. And wow, there's a lot to do, and it's still a startup. We're just a couple of years old, and we're just getting going. But God has blessed us. We've seen so many wonderful things happen, and so many just miraculous things happen. And so we're excited to be where we are. We're really building our foundation and the foundation of the house and getting that in shape while we're partnering with obviously with 5 and 2 and the 5 and 2 studios in Dallas and his team to work together to finish these seasons and then to get the 7 seasons around the world to see if everyone everywhere can have a chance to experience the authentic Jesus.
Okay. Um, I just get excited when I hear about this. I mean, it's
I do
uh,
too. I still get excited. My wife sometimes, "Are you still having fun?" I said, "I'm having the best time of my life. I can't believe, that I get to do this." And my wife has said, "Well, the 40 years that you worked, in your previous employment at DaySpring, and that's prepared you for this time and this season." And I, I, I want to believe her, and I really do believe that this is just a time and a season that God has appointed me to this role, and I'm just enjoying it, and I'm grateful. I'm humbled because I think, wow, God chose me for this assignment and this time, and I'm just grateful.
let's talk about that. I want to tease that out, James. There are people who work to live, which is most of the population, and people who live to work. And I think you and I are in the same category there. We live to do something truly meaningful in the world.
That's right.
And being both believers, that has a very focused enterprise and purpose. And when God comes calling, um, it's almost never what we think, at least not in my
No,
experience.
no,
Um,
it's not with mine either.
and see, and I want to explore that for a minute because I don't discount people's experience, but if someone comes at me and says, "Oh well, God told me XYZ and ABC, and this is how it's going to be," well, my experience with the Almighty and if you experience in the Scripture, almost never follows that path. Um, uh, God chooses often very unlikely people to do his will and fulfill his plans. Let's go at Saul of Tarsus, who became St. Paul. Not the sort of person you'd normally choose to be a promoter of a rebellious religion that was on everybody's hate list. All right. Um, that's not who you would normally choose. And then there's, let's go way back, and then there's Moses, who had difficulty speaking. And the Almighty says, I want you to go back to the Pharaoh and tell him these things. Well, and often he had the same reaction that many other people have. There's somebody far better than me, Lord. No, no, this is not for me. Go talk to my brother-in-law. This is not for me. So let's talk about that. Did you need any convincing when this came your way?
I was surprised, would say, because I had, been praying about what was next steps. And, I agree with you. I wrote a book a few years ago called Blue Skies, and how do you live an extraordinary expectations, of what's around the corner? How do you keep your head up? And, I'm always looking to where God is, working, but He's usually working in other places where I'm looking, and so he has to sort of tap me on the shoulder and say, no, I'm over here, James, I'm over here. And I think for me, to think that I would be working, in a global media company and really working on something that can, speak to billions of people around the world, I was blown away. I was blown away. I was thinking, wow, God, that when I got that call, and even when Mark called, I was not expecting. A few months later we met. I had no idea what Come and See was. I didn't know. I knew they had worked on other ministries and worked with some other groups, but I did not know he had just started the Come and See Foundation I think about 8 months earlier than that, and was just trying to get it started to really come alongside and help Dallas and the team, fund and then translate, and then distribute the languages that they didn't want to do at that time. So which would be like languages 26 to 600. No TV series has been, translated into more than maybe 50 languages. And that was the TV series called Baywatch, of all places.
God.
That
So you're trying to beat Baywatch's record here.
we're
Um,
trying to beat. We're already ahead of that record right now.
okay,
We're at
good, good.
125 languages, and
You know,
so yes, I was surprised. I was like, wow, and really on the board the first year we were not when we first started, and then we made a decision a few months into that time to say, hey, it'd be better to put not just the nonprofit but the for-profit. I mean, in not just the non-commercial but the commercial rights all under the umbrella of a nonprofit. We thought that might take 3 or 4 months. It took 8 or 10 months. And then we got into
mhm.
last summer. And then that's when the board said, okay, now what are we going to do? And we have to really have these 7 series of the Jesus, historical life of Jesus. And then we want to take that around the world for the next 10, 20, 30 years. What is that going to look like? And that's when the board said, well, we think that you should lead that. And I said, no, who? You know, I wasn't expecting that and or,
So
thinking,
you
and,
went.
and it
So
took, took a month.
you went from board chair to CEO.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But
now,
board
okay.
vice chair,
Oh,
Marilyn
okay.
was the chair.
Well,
Mhm.
typically, when that happens, things are in a free fall, and you're called in to rescue. But in this case,
Not at
it's
all. Yeah.
the reverse. Now, um, you know, acquiring the IP, intellectual property, is not an easy thing. Um, there are a lot of personalities involved, a lot of competitive interest involved. I think you were certainly wise in knowing that to protect it, it had to be in a safe place, and in this case, in a secure nonprofit setting. Anyone who's been in the media production or publishing world knows that whoever owns the IP controls its distribution and its visibility. And there have been lots of, I'm a fan of old film, and there have been lots of wonderful films, classic masterpieces that are locked in a vault somewhere because
Locked in a vault.
whoever owns the IP is unwilling to distribute them. And
Right.
so, and I'm sure that was what was the concern here. Uh, you
Mhm.
know, um, was it I mean, without getting into too many details, was it difficult or fraught, either was it terms or price or a combination of both?
It was really mission. It was really mission, and I give the Greens and I give Dallas Jenkins really great credit on, hey, how do we make this free for the world? That was, and how do we keep biblical accuracy in the parts that are, that have the biblical word there, and how do we keep this? It's the historical life of Jesus.
Hmm.
It's like Dallas says, it's a TV show. It's not inspired word of God. It's not the Bible. Go read the Bible. But we really knew that to get this finished, the 7 seasons that he wanted to do, it was going to take obviously a significant financial investment. Continued. They had already had 3 seasons when we came along, and so that was really good. But they needed a different model to keep going. And so what we provided was a different model to not only help raise those funds, but to really, keep the heart and mission of what it was about, theological, what we call theological governance. And then the third is how do we make it free for the world? As Dallas says, the gospel is free, so the movie should be free. And so the TV series should be free. So that's really what we spent the next 9 months. There was a lot of things to work out because the name of the company was The Chosen, and so we were buying The Chosen name, and so we had to work through. Well, then they're going to change their name as the production house because we part of the deal was that we turned around and hired Dallas as the 5 and 2 studios as the studio to do these shows for the next 10 years.
Right.
We talked about there could be some other things. We're looking at Moses and the book of Moses and the book of Acts, following this, and that those are still, we got things to work out on those, but we've got the agreements, and so that took time to really get, that piece, and then the marketing. They're doing the marketing of the commercial side, and then our job is to do the marketing on the non-commercial side, the churches and to ministries around the world. And what's amazing about this is it's a worldwide project. I mean, you think about the translations of us getting this into our target is 600 languages. That will reach 95% of the world in their local language.
Now,
So
are you planning to do, is this going to be subtitled or voiceover?
it's going to be well subtitled. It's going to be dubbed. We're dubbing it in 100 languages. What we started out to
Voiceover.
do 2 years ago was dubbing, in 100 languages and subtitling in 500. With AI, we believe we can dub a whole lot more, if not all. We don't, as time goes along, is because about a third of the world's languages, are not written languages, or the people groups that reach those, and so yet they understand. So how do we dub that into their language? That's the work. And again, we've got season one already in 125 languages. If you go on the app, the website, you will see
Voiceover.
those
You
languages available. Yes,
125
there.
voiceovers. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it's
Uh,
amazing. And so that we have seen thousands of stories come back from people around the world because they're hearing the historical Jesus and seeing the historical Jesus in their language, and that's just been an amazing thing.
Voiceover is very complicated, even without AI, because you have to have a separate voice for every character. All right. It has a male or female character, has to come through authentically. Um, Pronunciation, of course, has to be correct. And then, of course, you're doing the subtitling on top of that. Um, well, let me just say, James, it's a lot more complicated than going to the opera. All right.
It's a lot more complicated. The amount of we got right now 135, what we call, subject matter experts around the world already that are helping us on those languages. We got
Okay.
to get the voiceovers, like you say. We got it. We AI is allowing us to use, less people. I mean, we get the
Yeah.
voices, but then we can use less and then apply that for men and women. It's just an amazing technology of how quickly it's changing.
Um, this is I'm just letting this soak in. So, all right, let's rewind a little bit. And now you've been asked to do this, and you're just kind of launched off. But then I understand from speaking with your advancement vice president that you have to raise the money for each year's subscription, or excuse me, each year's production from scratch, from zero every year. Because I
Zero
said to
every
her,
year.
I said, so this foundation is a cash in, cash out enterprise. And she said, yes, no endowment.
Yes.
Uh, Tell me about your fundraising a little bit and how that's done.
Well, we have some patrons that have invested to get us launched and get us started and cover all of our overheads. One patron, and that's really been, if you don't have that starting block, in place, it's
Yeah,
really
it's
hard to
tough.
get launched. Very tough to get
Uh,
launched. And so having that to cover all of our overheads allows us to go, out and talk to folks about, hey, we got to fund production. We've got to fund translation. We've got to fund marketing. Those are those three big buckets that we've got to fund. But our major, push, you would say, or our major energy has gone into really funding that production.
mhm.
And that's in that, you know, has been 50 to $75 million just on the production side, 50 to $72 million in that range a year that we've got to do to be able to just fund the production. So we do that, by audience participation has been amazing. We have about 190 to 200,000 people over the last 2 years that have given us some dollar amount, averaging 40 or $50 is what probably averages that we see. And then we have other donors that are giving us, 50,000, 100,000 or more, that we are
Mhm.
seeing significant gifts because what's been amazing to me is, and if you've been around development, I've been around some of that. I'm on a couple of, boards of universities, one university that I'm on a board and an advisory board on another. And when you're raising money to raise $100 million takes years. It takes years.
And
And
it's done in a series of 3 to 5 year pledges, my friend.
That's
Yes.
right, 3 to 5 year
Mhm.
pledges. And so we have been able to, achieve, and raise over $100 million in the last really 2 years just in, individuals that give, small amounts.
Mhm.
And that's been really key. And we've got to continue to build that list. We got to continue to grow and to communicate to people those needs. We're in season 6 right now. We're funding. We're 2/3 of the way through that funding. We hope to get that raised and funded by the time we finish filming, which is September. So we've been amazingly, God has just given us so much grace, but people, and I believe it's because people are affected themselves by the movie, I keep saying a movie, the TV series is the historical life of Jesus. It's like I'm sure you mentioned to me your favorite folks are, James Z and Matthew. The uh, people find themselves in characters or in, the situation, and they are drawn in like I am the same way, and I just am so drawn in, and that makes me want to get this around the world to other people. So I want to
Mm.
give something to help that happen. And so that's been, yet we that every year is a new year, so it's hard to
Um,
repeat those
well,
things.
well, in your case, yes. Now, of course, from a fundraising point of view, critical to your success will be a very high donor renewal rate. Um,
Yes.
Organizations don't realize that when they don't pay attention to that, they're doing two things. They're churning their donors, and then secondly, they're condemning themselves to what I call entry level gifts. Because an individual, even if capable to make, say, a 5 figure gift, generally will not do that out of the gate. They will
Okay.
come to you in a smaller way. They'll test, because they have their own reasons for investing in this. And you've discovered this too. I'm sure that they may not be the ones you think they are. Okay.
Right.
That's the key point. I like to say, God save me from nice people, because you have to kind of get over yourself to really
Yeah.
be in tune with the investor. And if I can just preach for 15 seconds here, that philanthropy really isn't about the recipient organization, it's about the investor and the opportunity to give that investor the joy and the fulfillment that they are looking for, you see. And when we can focus on that rather than on our needs and on our money, a funny thing happens. You raise more money than ever. And the scriptural principle, when you lose your life, you gain it, is
Mm,
applicable in so many areas. You see, when we
sure
give
is.
ourselves up and then we get immeasurably more back. And this is
Very
what I
much so.
tell nonprofits: is that please, let's
Hmm.
just don't be focus on those who want to invest in you, you know, and what their reasons may or may not be. So I know we're going to talk about fundraising in another setting, but having that very high renewal rate is critical. Do you know that the average renewal rate for C3s in this country, first year, is 49%? Okay. Now,
Hmm.
now, and people go, "Oh, isn't that great?" No, wait a minute. You are in the commercial world, right? What if you lost half of your customers every single year? How could you stay afloat?
You, you would not, you'd have to have a big pipe on new stuff. It would be tough. It'd be a
That's right.
really tough assignment.
And so I tell people there's more than enough money out there, and there's more than enough people who are interested in supporting you, but they aren't infinite. And there is a certain segment that will support you, and then there's a certain segment that will not, for very good reasons. It's just not on their radar, you see. And so you have those that come to you, you really have to bring them into a family to let them know that they're important and attend to their needs. And guess what? The rest of it takes care of itself. You know, and what I want to go, I want to talk about the production in a minute. One of the things that's impressed me, two things, where I know that they started out on a pretty much a shoestring budget. It was crowdfunded. It never looks cheesy, James. And I've looked at the whole thing. I mean, I've looked very closely. Okay, and then the other thing that I think is interesting, I have an MDiv. I'm a Yale Divinity School graduate, and one of the things that I studied while I was there was the culture of the first century. And the gentleman that taught me that, a man by the name of Abraham Malherbe, was a recognized world expert in how the Hellenistic and Judaistic cultures all interchanged and how they came together, what the environment was like. And we read a lot of the extra biblical literature that was written during the time to get a feel for it. And one of the things that I've been very impressed with is how they have very accurately filled in the backstory of some of these things. Uh, it's not per se preserved in the scripture, but it's very consistent with what was around them. There's, you know, I didn't
We call it, Dallas calls it the plausibility. This is
plausibility.
the plausibility of
Uh,
what it could have
so
been like in first century. They try to make it as close as they can to say, hey, Peter had a wife and she had a name. We just didn't know her name, right? We don't know. We know he healed her mother-in-law, but we don't know her name. And so so he put names and personalities with those.
and just environments that say, okay, this is plausible. And I have watched carefully, James. All right, I've not seen one gong moment in all of this. So kudos to the production
Yeah.
team and the writers that have done this.
They've done
Um,
an amazing job,
uh,
I tell you.
and well,
Dallas and
and the
the
whole
team,
whoever's
Ryan
idea it
and Tyler have
was,
done a great job.
whoever's idea it was to place Matthew on the spectrum, I think was sheer genius. Um, he comes across and you realize, he's alienated from his family. He's making a good income because he's sort of sold his soul to the government kind of thing. It's where but see, he didn't see it that way. See,
Yeah.
he saw it as a way to make a living, and he had these certain gifts that he was going to use in a productive way,
Mm.
and that's, by the way, that's where a lot of us find ourselves, James. Um,
Yeah.
Modern day tax collectors with a different name. Uh, but
Mm.
I just find this fascinating, and I just want to say that is one of the key pieces of it.
It's very much so.
I don't have a lot of patience for some of my brethren who are what I call two-dimensional literalists that think, well, just because it isn't in there doesn't mean it didn't happen or somehow it's not right. Is it plausible? Could it have happened? Does it in any way take away from the central message? Well, no, it doesn't. And and so that I, you want to
Well,
speak?
you know what, we talk about, not just why we do this, that we want to share the story of Jesus with the world, through the power of media. And that really drives us. But, we do that by appealing to the one. And we talk about, this issue of authenticity and excellence. How do you integrate that with an historical message that is biblically true and plausibility of the seasons of the things you're filling in the story with? Is the
Mm-hmm.
plausibility, and doing that with excellence so that an individual one to one like you and I look at that and know the excellence draws us in, because we're not used to seeing excellence a lot of times in Christian films. We don't
No.
always see that. And part of that is because of the cost. Part of that is because of the actors. Part of that's because of a lot of factors, right? But Dallas and the team have done an amazing job of keeping the quality high, and that's one reason the financial pieces of that is it's an expensive proposition to do that, but we get great results and we see change lives because of that, and that has been the heart of not only our patron but also the 200,000 people plus that have given that we think, by the way, will be a million people giving. And that's where when we see a million people giving, that's when we're going to see, even more abilities to get more messages out there more effectively.
Let's talk about being the best in high quality for a minute. We have no farther to look than our Lord's first miracle
Yeah.
of the marriage at Cana. And I love the
Mhm.
way they portrayed that, where the host and the wedding master, all the individuals, they were stupefied. This is the best I've ever tasted. This is
That's
wonderful.
right.
And of course, it was even custom then to bring out the lesser vintages later, and that's the way it's done. You put your first good stuff out first, so to speak. But so that tells you right there, our God is a God of excellence, James.
Excellence, excellence.
And we want to do the best and be the best and present him in the best possible way. So I get kind of frustrated with some of my brethren who think that, mediocre is good enough. No,
Mhm.
it's not. It's not.
No,
And I guarantee you, The Chosen would have not reached where it is if it were a mediocre quality production,
would
even if it
not.
had the same
No,
message. You
that's
see?
right. That's right. That's right.
Um, so how now, this is a cash in, cash out thing. All right.
Yes, it
And
is.
how many donors do you have now? Live donors?
About 200,000.
200,000. Okay.
200,000.
Okay. And how much are you raising in cash in rough terms every year?
Oh, north of $100 million a year we have to raise to cover all the costs that we're incurring.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because in
All right.
translation alone, just getting these translations done is, in that 10 to $15 million range just to keep the translations. And we can spend more the faster we go. Obviously, technology is helping us bring some costs, but we're getting running other new costs, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
have around the country to get that done. And so keeping that between the translation, the marketing, and the production, it's north of 100 million a year.
And then if I understood you correctly, you have a couple of core patrons that pay for the administration costs of the foundation itself.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we
Well,
sure
that's an
do.
ideal arrangement, really.
It's an ideal
Uh,
arrangement.
and you can make that as so.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
Go
the
ahead.
big deal we've got too facing us is that, once we get the seven seasons done, we've got to we want to keep people focused on, obviously, if we have other productions, but we have the translation, and then we still have getting this around the world. As we finish this, it'll take us about 8 more years to get all the translation done that we've got to finish to get to 600 languages. So there's going to be a lot more to do. And this thing, we see this for 10, 20, 30, 50 years as a great, in our generation, one of the best, tools, we would say, the best, ways that we can join in the gospel movement, you could say. How do we do that more
Hmm.
effectively? And that's really our challenge and opportunity is continue that funding that's going to can really take that distribution and that translation around the world and then continue other new productions.
You know, this is, for lack of a better term, this was the strategy of Walt Disney for many years, was to produce a timeless product that would
Yes.
periodically be reintroduced to a new generation. That's exactly what he did. And
Yes.
that's why for many years the Disney IP was so closely guarded.
Mhm.
That and they wouldn't even do a lot of distribution only on their timing because they wanted to preserve the impact of what they were doing. And it looks as though you're trying to do the same thing. Is that by the time you get this done, okay, another generation will be coming up, and you can
That's right.
begin all over again because it's a I think it's a timeless production as well as a timeless
Yes.
story, but it's a timeless
Yes.
production.
Yeah.
I think it'll
That's
wear
right.
well as it gets older. I really
That's right.
do. Um,
Well, I think that for us, we really do have a desire to see everyone everywhere experience the authentic Jesus, and so that's going to take. I wish we could do it in 3 years, but it's going to take us a long run. If we can do that in the next 10 years, that would be an amazing story. That we join other folks to really get this message out there in a way that people visually can be drawn in. It's that there's a written word is critical to have the written word and have this is more like the visual word, right? The visual
mhm.
be able to do that. And so many of us learn in this generation, especially, you could say reads less and watches more, of the
Yeah.
technology that allows that to happen. So what a privilege we have, and so many folks have joined us, and we need so many more.
Well, we are a visual world. I know, and I mentioned to you, here I am. I've got a Yale MDiv, and yet when I watched the most recent season, and they're at the Last Supper, for some reason, James, for some reason, for the first time, it dawned on me, this is a Seder meal. Hello, I mean, excuse me. Well, yeah, of course it is, but I had never made that connection before, and it was like, oh, okay. Then you've been able to do that. Something else I was going to say is, um, God allows us to be junior partners in His enterprise, and the fact that He has allowed you to be a part of His work, as you and I both know, He doesn't need either one of us. But He's chosen to allow us to be part of that, and for you, that's quite an opportunity, James.
It
Um,
is. It's quite an opportunity, and the Lord has brought so many other good folks to the table with us, with me, and it takes a team. It takes a team of folks, and just the the connections, and the people that God has brought are amazing. And so it's just been that's what makes it such a joy to lead and to be a part of something that's big. It's really, and again, stage and season of life and everything. It's just not about me. It's about look what God is doing. Look what God is up to, and how do we
mhm,
come alongside the mission and vision of the work is fulfilling because it's something more significant that is bigger than we could think or ask. And
mhm,
one of my favorite scriptures is that Ephesians 3:20 that God is can do exceedingly abundantly more than we can think or ask. And that's what we're seeing him do here is just wow, we had an idea that was birthed and with Dallas and 2017, and it had some failures and some struggles, and yet God takes the ordinary and does the extraordinary, and makes it extraordinary.
I've not met Mr. Jenkins, but I have a feeling that he and I would share some similar experiences in that, um, we have good ideas, but when we try to do it on our own, somehow it never gets very far.
That's right. It never
And
gets very
so
far.
when you finally come to a point where you're going to say, all right, Lord, I do believe this is my calling. This is what think you want me to do, but I don't know how to do it anymore. Um, I need some guidance. And it's when we have that level of openness where he feels he can come in, that things can happen. I'm sure you've had situations like that in your own life. Um,
Very much so. It's I many times pray for ease and comfort, and God uses pain and suffering to get my attention. Uh, so that it's God uses tension. He puts tension in the system to get our no, nowhere in Scripture I had a Bible teacher many years ago that he said, James, to a group of us, he said, I want you to look up and find a place where God used a man or a woman that didn't have to go through hardship, you know. And the reality is, and he got get your Bible out and look. But there's just not one. There's not one person that God used, man or woman, that didn't have to go through 40 years in the desert or 12 years in going into the jail and dungeons like Joseph, and all the different seasons of Ruth and Esther and other player people that went through so much. To get to the ready to where God was able to use them. Because then at that point, it wasn't about them. It was about look what God is up to and joining Him.
when we come to the part, when we come to the place, James, that we realize it really is not about us. It's we play a role, we participate, but as I like to tell people, just don't start believing your own press releases. All right. Uh,
That's right.
because if you do, you're headed for trouble real fast. Um, but is there one thing? Could you tell us one story about the chosen production that perhaps hasn't made it into the public realm yet? Maybe backstage, front stage, that you'd be willing to share with us.
Well, I think that, season six is being filmed, and I was able to be on the set, just 2 weeks ago on some things, and to see, Jesus, in some of the situations as we see him carrying that cross is just the it's one thing to read it on a page, but when you see it being acted out, it is it brings you to tears. It really does because of we have a lot of volunteers that we have thousands of people volunteer to come and be extras, and they've done that for years, and so many of the extras that we're having to yell, crucify him and kill him, and he's blasphemer, and to see that uh, being recorded, you could say, and filmed was just uh, heartbreaking. I mean, because I think I was part of that, putting him there. I was part of that. So there's some amazing scenes in season six. Obviously, where it's called the crucifixion, and that's what this it's that 24-hour period that we're gonna see that is the crucifixion from just different views, and to see that happen. Jonathan Rumi does an amazing job of personalizing it, because for Jonathan, this is a life journey. It's an amazing story, and for him to he wants to really be as close to Scripture and to exemplify that for us to get that understanding of what really happened.
So this
So
is the
that would
senior.
be a scene that
Jonathan is a senior script writer, screenwriter.
no, Jonathan is Jesus, and
Oh,
Jonathan Rumi
okay.
is the
Jonathan
Jesus.
Rumi. Okay.
Right, right, Jonathan Rumi, and then of course the script writers are Dallas and Ryan and Tyler and those guys. But putting that together and seeing that being filmed was very moving, very moving.
Um, well, Mr. Rumi is very devout in his own right, as I
He
know,
is. He is.
and I know that he he was sort of what bouncing around as an actor for a long time. Um, um, uh, Bishop Barron, Robert Barron, is a personal friend of Jonathan's, and he told me that they've known each other for a number of years, and that Jonathan just hadn't quite found himself until this role came along.
Yeah.
And then there's a recording. I use the Hallow app for devotions, and at one point Jonathan says, "Well, I had to come to the end of myself before God could use me." He says that. Um, and then I also understand that Mr. Rumi is a method actor, so that you never know who you're approaching. Is it Jonathan or is it Jesus? You have to find out first who he is today.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, uh, that has to be frightening to play the Son of Man.
Oh,
Uh, to so
he
put
remind, he
yourself.
reminds himself. He reminds himself, and I've had a number of visits with him, and he always says, "My name is." People say, Jesus is no. My name is Jonathan. I'm playing a role. I'm playing Jesus, but he takes the responsibility very, very, very seriously of what it really means to portray, the life, of Jesus while he was here on earth, and he takes it so seriously, and he wants it to be biblically accurate. He wants it to be as close, to historical, understanding as we possibly can. So he's been very, very dedicated to that.
one of the things that I really appreciated in the way Jesus is portrayed, now it is in the New Testament, the Scripture, but it has to be teased out, and that is that Jesus was a very intentional man. He was very focused. He was not kind of random around whatever happens today happens. He was very flexible in some ways, but he was very, very intentional. And that's something that doesn't often come through in a surface reading of the Gospels. And then the other thing that I is that he took people exactly where he found them. He didn't make any preconditions on them. He came to them as they were. Of course, this was the principal objection of the Pharisees, is that he didn't qualify people first. Um, I heard a sermon illustration several years ago, James, that said, and there's Jesus sitting over there at a table full of sinners having a wonderful time, and he took people for who they were as creations, children of God, and then he would accept them and offer them something better and different, and they could accept it or reject it, but he didn't put preconditions on it. Come to me, just follow me. You know, um, Perhaps my favorite scene, James, is the calling of Matthew. He's out there in the marketplace, wherever, and Matthew's in his little box in there, and he says, "Matthew, follow me." And of course, Matthew comes out and says to the Roman guard, "I've had enough. Here it is. Goodbye." Well, standing with Jesus is James and Andrew and Simon, who became Peter. And Simon, they're those two. They'd had direct dealings with Matthew, and they weren't pleasant. All right, and so he says to Jesus, "Are you sure you want to do this? This is really different." And Jesus' response was classic. "Simon, get used to different." You see, he was ready to break all the conventions to bring people to him.
Was.
And Simon, get used to different. I love that line, and you know, we can't put restrictions on Jesus. We can't put a frame
No,
around him. He defies
no,
that.
he
I
defies
mean,
that.
in the early part of the Christian church, there were all these various blasphemies, these sects that would try to limit him. The Gnostics. Oh, he really wasn't physical. It was all spiritual and blah blah blah. Try to put boundaries around Jesus, and you can't do that. And this is something that I think the Chosen has done very, very well, James. They have not put
Mhm.
any boundaries on Jesus, and they've done a wonderful job. So you've done a great job. You really have.
Well, I'm just here to support the team that's doing it. They're doing an
Okay.
amazing job.
All right. So you say season 6 is being currently filmed,
It
and
is season six being filmed, and it'll be it started in about the middle of April, and it'll go till about the 10th or 12th of September. So it's a lot happening.
and when do you plan on having its theatrical release?
It's going to be later next year when it will be coming out. So they're working on the dates on that, and then it'll we'll be into the early part of 27 with it. So we'll go in the last part of 26 into 27.
All right.
So
Now 5, I presume, will become available on Amazon later this year.
June 15th starts on June 15th. It'll be on Amazon, and then over that 2 or 3 week window, I think they'll release 2 or 3 episodes, and then next week 2 or 3 episodes, and the next week 2 or 3 episodes. So
Okay.
that'll take place over the last couple of weeks of June, and then it will be you know worldwide available here at the end of September or somewhere around that time.
Okay. All right. Now,
Pretty exciting, pretty exciting,
well, it's very exciting, James.
very exciting.
Uh, you know, did you
Oh,
did you think your second act was going to be like this? You went from
no, not at all. This has got 10 acts written all over it. It's just amazing what it's just. And I had the privilege to get to travel to Spain for the world premiere, that we had one in Dallas on the 20th and the 25th of March. We had one in Spain, and to see three or four, 5,000 people come out to Public Square there to be there for the runway, to be able to meet the characters, their excitement, and the younger audience around the world is unbelievable. Just to see doesn't mean that older people aren't watching it, but the younger people are really there's a movement among young folks that to really see that's happen, and so they've become huge fans. I mean, they're so committed to not only supporting it but also getting it, distributed around the world.
Mhm. Well, I think what we're seeing worldwide now is the absolute realization of the failure of postmodernism. You know,
Yes,
we have
you bet.
descended to the absolute rock bottom, and so what we have is sort of an empty nihilism. That's all that they can offer.
All they can offer.
Is this it? You know, and so the human spirit is eternal, and there's a yearning for something better, and all the time. And so when now postmodernism has failed, and so what do we do? Well, maybe we need to go back to the church again. Oh, maybe there was something there after all. And so, and the people who are most willing, of course, are younger people who haven't yet solidified into concrete one way or the other.
Yeah, that's right.
um,
Well, you know what? We sort of view our role as a catalyst at this time. We aren't the movement, even though there's a big movement with the chosen, right? A movement has already been happening, and we're part of a bigger movement, and that's what really. And I think we can be the tip of the spear. We can really help break through with some things because we have a lot of folks joining us that are viewing and participating and excited and ambassadors. But we can help accelerate a global movement. That's what gets me excited. We can really help be an accelerant. And wow, wow God. I call these wow God moments when I see, when you see God, you most of life is I call lived on the side of the mountain. You're just plodding along and nothing happens as far as just life. And then all of a sudden God shows up and does something and you go, wow, God. I mean, that's amazing. And you see him. And I've just seen multiple wow God moments in the last 2 years as I've worked here as part of Come and See Foundation. Saw a lot of them before that, but just God he never runs out of new ideas. He's always got more, and he's got a plan that's not mine. And so we're really working to come alongside and be a part of that, bigger movement and accelerate a global movement.
I'm reminded of something that happened when I was at Yale. I was taking my Old Testament course, and the instructor was an archaeologist who actually worked with Kathleen Kenyon to open eye. So we're having this discussion, and they're talking about the parting of the Reed Sea. And if you know anything about the topography, it's the Red Sea is pretty shallow at that point, and it's kind of marshy and everything. And he's talking about, well, it's known for very heavy storms, and that could have contributed to the parting of the water. Well, there's this young man that shot his hand up in the back, and from one of our more literal traditions, and he said, "Mr. I forget the man's name, Mr. Smith. Well, aren't you limiting God by doing this, by saying that it was nature?" Here was his response, James. I've never forgotten it. Mr. Smith, I really don't think that the Almighty is limited by the imagination of Cecil B. DeMille.
That is so true, isn't it?
It,
Oh,
it
God is
shut
not
down.
bound by,
It shut him down right then.
yeah, that's right.
Um,
God can do anything, and it's amazing. God's got a plan, and it's not mine, not yours. It's His plan, and our job is to be a part of that. He's asked us to be a part. That's what. Back to that thing about I feel like I'm in the grandstand sometimes watching, and then God says, "Hey, come out here and play. Come and
on
join.
down.
Come on down." And I just think, "Wow, who me?" And I go, "Wow, God, you're just amazing to see you at work." He never works the same either. I just think, he's always got a new, those aha moments when you see it, this, we read all the parables. we want God to be a formula. We want it to be a
Ah,
formula. We want to get this down and okay, go wash your eyes, in the pool of Siloam every time. That's what you're going to do. Now, God always has something new. He's doesn't very seldom does things the same way because he knows we'll want to make it predictable. We want to, worship the process versus the outcome of what he's up to.
well, there was a book written by J.B. Phillips a number of years ago. The title, Your God is Too Small. We try to put God in a box, and he is infinite and he is beyond comprehension for us. Um, and I can't even begin to fathom God really. I get little glimpses here and there, you know, and we're told in the telling of the burning bush, he says, "You can't even look at me directly. You don't have. You're too finite for who I am. I'll give you a peek, yeah, but you're too finite." And I think that we have to constantly remind ourselves that He is infinite, we are finite, um, and it's just, yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed this, James. We could
I have
talk a
too.
while.
We
Um,
could. This has been wonderful.
is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't ask? Here's your chance.
Oh yeah, there's a chance. I think my heart and hope is that people, if you haven't seen The Chosen, you'll watch it. You will engage, and that would be a big piece of that because I think it could change your life. It can transform your life into something that you haven't discovered up to this point. And so that'd be my encouragement. Obviously, we'd love people to join us, but we're really more most important is a transformed life. We want to see people
Mm-hmm.
experience who God is, and so I hope that the chosen helps that journey helps you along your journey to really discover who Jesus really is. Not know we can know a lot about God and a lot about Him, but that doesn't change me. I have to experience who He is, and sort of like until you get into the game, you're in the stands, you're just watching the game, and you have a lot of opinions and thoughts. But if you get into the game, then you see you experience what God is up to.
Um, there was I think a podcast with Jordan Peterson recently, and it was between him and another psychologist, and they made the point that you cannot really appreciate a transformative experience until you've been transformed.
Mm.
You can talk about it, you can reference it, you can examine it, but you will always come out at the other end different than you were going in and have a perspective that you never could have had. And that's exactly what you're telling me.
Very much so. Very much so.
Well, James, thank you. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm sure our audience has. And I
Yes.
invite you, if you haven't, to look at The Chosen. I was a little bit of a skeptic. I talked to James and I said I'm a bit of a cynic about Christian media. A lot of it tends to be propaganda and not really up to what the story really is. But they've certainly succeeded with The Chosen and giving you that immediacy, that power of the experience that is authentic. And I want to thank James for taking his time to do this today. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted this to been a blessing, and just to thank you, Larry, for your time and for the work you're doing. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. All right. Thanks again for tuning in,
Yeah.
and we'll have another episode very soon. Thank you.